Editing.
You probably should have done this before I started recording.
Here, I'll have to stop a minute. I'm assuming that's 19. Okay, it is. Testing.
I guess the first question would be, how long have you been working as a historian?
Good question. I have been here since 1987. So I came here on an internship through SUNY Albany in the public history department. And fortunately, they kept me.
I guess during your time as a historian, what kind of cool things have you learned about Rensselaer, the county in general?
About RPI or just generally the county?
I guess RPI.
I guess RPI. I think it's, that's interesting because I think it's probably some of our correspondence and things that we have in our collection that we really, I think, always find interesting, tidbits of photographs and, surveyors that are working on the Post-and-Kill Creek or, correspondence from, we have this great letter from a man who turned out to be a mathematician, and he was doing some work up at RPI, and he was a black man, and then wrote this incredible letter during the draft riots in 1863. So we have a lot of that kind of information that comes through. Their RPI has been around for so long, since 1823, that they've been involved with the city and the county and industries and things like that. So it's always fascinating.
I get this, as working here for a long time since we're doing our documentary on ghosts and everything, right, and stuff for RPI, people say that West Hall sometimes is haunted.
Haunted, yeah. It's it's the perennial curse that keeps coming up about West Hall. Well, let me give you a little background about West Hall and the person who started it, which was Father Reverend Peter Haverman, who was a Belgian priest. He came into Troy in the 1820s and became the pastor of St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church, which was on Hutton and Fifth Street. It's Fifth Avenue now. And he basically started all the Catholic churches in Troy. And he was also really much the catalyst for helping all the new immigrant groups to assimilate. And at one point by the 1840s, you're seeing, with the large influx of Irish that were coming in, particularly from the potato famine, that were settling in Troy, and they were down in the neighborhood just under Mount Ida, which is now we all know as Prospect Park. And there weren't healthcare services for them. And so he convinced, basically it was the Daughters of Charity, to come in and create a hospital. And so their first hospital was actually down on Washington Street and Fifth. The problem with it was that it was literally next door to the railroad tracks. Now you have to think about it. These were not steam. This was belching smoke, going in, hardly really good air to induce health care. However, it was in the right neighborhood because so many of these Irish had settled in there at the foot of the hill. A lot of them are working in the steel industry. A lot of these people working in the collar and cuff industry, which is now a really burgeoning industry here in Troy. Needs thousands of workers. So once the Civil War ended, it's 1869, they were able to build a bigger hospital, which of course is at the head of Fulton Street on 8th. And Marcus Cummings is the architect, and they design it after they followed what the Italians were doing, with these beautiful portico sides that had screened porches and things like that, so you have fresh air. You're up on the hill, away from the soot and all the grimy industrial, smoke and everything. So now you're farther up on the hill, which is great. And it is helping to cater to basically low income people who couldn't afford to have doctors coming into your house and things like that. Now, this whole thing about, I don't know where it started about soldiers coming in, because that was long gone. There was an actual other hospital that was up near Oakwood Cemetery that was taking care of troops. That was really basically a troop hospital. So there wasn't a lot of that, and certainly not by 1869. That had really whittled out. So this whole, Civil War hospital thing is, it's just not going to cut any mustard on this one. They also, I've heard about people screaming, and the nurse Betty. I've yet to have found the thing about the fire. I've yet to have found any evidence about this big fire that supposedly happened. Going through newspapers yet, there's been little tiny things, but never any major disastrous fire. And the mental patients, and to a great degree, ended up usually out in the home that was county run out, which is now where Griswold Heights is. Up between Campbell Avenue and Spring Avenue, or they went to the Marshall Sanitarium, which was started by that gentleman that's over on your left. And that was on the other side of the Post and Kill Gorge. So they did not have really mental floors in the way that we think of mental units today. So, you have to kind of really be careful with that. They did have a contagious ward, for disease, because at this point, you go through lots of tuberculosis and things like that. By the time the flu epidemic happens in 1918, they were out of that building. They were at the new Troy Hospital. So again, they did use parts of it for overflow during the flu epidemic, and a couple of times when tuberculosis was getting really bad, but it was not not used all the time that way. So I just think it's kind of interesting that there's these, stories about that. When you got a really old building, they creak and groan and moan and everything else. So there also was not a cemetery. I've heard that rumor that there was a cemetery attached. There wasn't. People that were buried, and even indigent people, were buried up at the Mount Ida Cemetery or at the old Mount Ida, which is on the other side of Prospect Park, kind of right down in the flats behind where there's a new student housing there across from the Muzzes, where the little Polish place is on 15th and Congress, and there's a new apartment there. Down behind there was another old cemetery. So that's those ones. That's the 20-cent version of those of the kind of history of, and of course when they left, the building really was empty for a while until Catholic High came in and made it their first home from 1920s until the 1950s when they moved up to Lansingburg.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, are there any other buildings that have rumors and stuff about being haunted here at REI?
Not that I've ever heard of. No, I mean, again, not that I've heard of. I mean, I suppose maybe there's stories. You probably should go through the old school student papers or something to see if some things that came up. Most of those buildings on the hill are not that old. I mean, relatively speaking. Most were built in the 20th century anyway. And, because that campus, their original campus was downtown on River Street. It was actually, if you know where the Bellinopoli Bakery is, it was over near there. And then they moved over to the base of the hill. And then after the fire of 1862, they kept moving up. And so the building that's next to the approach, next to the stairway, that was the last remaining building from their kind of second campus reiteration. And then the campus as you know it today kind of really starts around the turn of the century. So most of those buildings are all 20th century buildings and built for the they were actually built as campus buildings. They weren't something else and then converted.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So have you ever experienced anything that you would say is paranormal?
in West Hall, going through West Hall,
That or anything else around campus?
dead or any place? No, and I lived for 26 years. We lived right on Burnett Avenue, and I grew up on Beeman. I grew up in Beeman Park, so I have been in every single building on the campus practically. Can't think of many that I haven't been in, and lived there forever. And I never had anything. I never had any weird things happen or occurrences that I felt any more than in this building, in these buildings. We've got this is the building we're sitting in right now, was built in 1836. The building next door, the Hart-Cluett House, was built in 1827. I mean, lots of people died in them because people died. The problem is that we make everything dark and mysterious as opposed to just death is a natural part of life. Lots of people die in buildings that have been around for this long, and they laid them out. And they didn't do funeral homes. You were laid out in your front parlor. Yeah. So, but it's not creepy. It's just the way it was.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If you think in terms of, think about how hospice runs today. And for the longest time, people distanced themselves from death because doctors moved. You went into a hospital. People got sick in a hospital. They die in a hospital. And then the funeral director comes in and takes the body and you go to a funeral home. Now with hospice, as people got into end stage illnesses and disease and were terminal, hospice comes back into your home, or they have created smaller homes where you could go and still have that kind of thing without being in your house. People don't want hospice people. But it's come full circle where the care is done by family members and people in your home where you're comfortable.
Yeah. So, are there any other events or people that you know as a historian that might have influenced the perception of West Hall as being haunted?
No, I really can't think of how some of those things really gets any more than Forest Park Cemetery, which I swear it was started by fraternity brothers from RPI out on Pinewoods Avenue, who were haunting around Pinewoods, and now it's like, everybody's like, oh, it's the most haunted cemetery. It's an old abandoned cemetery.
You always feel haunted.
Yeah. Do I think that there's a whole entity of spirits and things that live around? Absolutely. I completely believe in that. Yeah. So, but do I think it becomes dark and creepy? Not at all.
All right, well, I think that's all that we have.
Sorry, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you with your argument of,
No, that's fair. We can always edit it.
I mean, they're getting like the truth of like our spirits. Like, are they getting vengeance, or are they just looking for someone like?
I think it's just, they're in some different, and I will give you a completely crazy example. My husband passed away almost 9 years ago. He had aggressive prostate cancer and died. He was young. He was like 65 when he died. And I was doing a research junket down in Washington, and he was supposed to go with me. We had always talked about this. I had been trying to get in touch with these family descendants. It was this big, huge estate down in the tidal water down in Virginia. And after he died, don't they finally get in touch with me and say, yes, come down and see the estate? And I was like, sure. So I was really, obviously I was sad because he died. But so I took my sister with me. In the meantime, we had a day to kill before we were going to meet them. So we went to DC. We were walking around and went to go over to the Museum of American History. Now you take the subway up, and we come up out of the subway near the Museum of American History, and we're walking along this long colonnaded building. Pouring rain that day. I mean, pouring rain. Nobody is out. We are the only two people you can see out, like 11:15 in the morning. And all at once I get hit in the face with this crazy smell of cigar smoke. which my husband smoked cigars. And to no one drove me crazy because he smoked cigars. He knew I didn't like it either. And I get this in the face of I stopped dead in my tracks. And my sister, she goes, what's the matter? I said, do you smell that? And I'm literally looking around because I'm trying to see if there's another body, and there's nobody else around. No one. Anywhere. And I was like, oh my God. And of course, I immediately burst into tears because I said, oh, there's Bob. He's telling me I'm with you on this trip. And he's going to let me know in the way that he knew I knew it with him because he knew I was so annoyed about the way his cigar smoked. So we come back. We went to the thing. I collected myself, called my kids to tell them the story. And they said, very typical of their father. He had a kind of funny sense of humor. And we came back, and as I'm walking past the spot where it happened, I look on the outside. There were all these columns, and I look on the outside of the column, and there's a big sign right where it happened that says, do not smoke within 500 feet of this building. And guess what the building was? The Environmental Protection Agency. Right? Which was, so, again, my husband, he was okay with the no smoking inside, and he wasn't allowed to even smoke in our house inside. We had kids, I said, nope, you're smoking outside. If you're going to smoke, you're going to smoke outside. He was okay with all that. Used to drive him crazy, though, was when you're out at a park or a ball game, and he wouldn't be smoking in the bleachers where the kids were, but he'd like way over the fence and somebody's like, I can't smoke. So he used to get annoyed with the whole outdoor smoking thing. So I knew that I was like, and there it is. But was it creeping? No. Like, it's kind of come. And I've actually had it happen about 5 or 6 times over the 9 years that there literally has been nobody around, and for whatever reason I'm doing something and I get hit in the face with cigar smoke. So I think they're here with us. They're in some other dimension, and I think that's probably one of the. I guess I could be a little ultra sensitive to things like when I see people talk about like haunted cemeteries and things, because no, they're just people that die. Not everybody was murdered, and and I get really upset. There's somebody who takes photographs of mausoleums up at Oakwood Cemetery, and there's the hearts and the clue. They're all his mausoleum. And then for Halloween, she changes the names of it. She puts Dracula's castle and stuff. And I said, you know what? There's descendants here. I said, if you did that on my husband's stone, I would be furious with you. He didn't die. He just died. So don't make things dark and mysterious just because it's old or just because somebody died. So I do get on my soapbox sometimes.
Yeah. So if there was like a ghost in West Hall, do you think that he or she would just be like wanting to join in on the classes, or?
I think they're just there. I think they're just part of an entity they're just, like I said, they're just there in a different dimension, whether it was a nurse or a patient or, I think they're just kind of here with us, and if and again, and then some of the things are just noises of an old building, and I've been in this building at 3 o'clock. I've been next door in the building, which is even older than this one. I've never felt anything creepy or felt uncomfortable. I've never had any of those kind of sensations like that. And there has been, when I tell you, a ton of people that have died in this house. You have lots of families and lots of things. So, both of these buildings. So, think of all the people that did die in West Hall when it was a hospital. And there would have been a lot. So, yeah.
Just also, when did West Hall join in as a campus building?
When did they took that over in the 50s after Catholic High left. That's when so by the late 50s or early 60s, I think they took it over and I think it had gone through different functions too as part of RPI. I'm not quite sure. I mean, you should, probably should get in touch with Tammy Gobert, who's the Special Archives up in the library. She might be able to fill you in a little bit better on that. I think they have some great photographs of the interior when it was the hospital. Yeah, but it was really it's a building that was really well ahead of its time, it was cutting edge when that was done with those. When you look at those early photographs and you see those sleeping porches and the whole concept of fresh air. was really an important part of that. It's an impressive building, really, still today. What is it used for now?
It's like a fine arts building.
Yeah.
Is it
it's-
arts? Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the ghost stories like I've heard. Basically, the building starts interrupted the band class, and immediately the band director was like, "Okay, what note is the ghost playing now? And how can we harmonize with it?"
That's fun. Yeah.
But
So, unless anybody else has anything to ask, I think that's so we need. Thank you so much for your cooperation. This was awesome, and it was very insightful too, and we really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate you coming down. No, it's great. You know, I think it's interesting to come up with different ideas, and I'd be interested to hear what when you get all done with this. I'd like to see
yeah, I
see it done. I'd be curious to see what the band directors or what other people what they've, you know, I haven't spent a ton of time in the building, so you know, hey, I'm the last one to say that there isn't.
And I do have one question. You keep
Yeah.
talking about I don't exactly, I think it's like Catholic or like Catholic. You kept on talking about a person. I don't remember. I don't really know the name of the person who founded West Hall or something.
The person who founded West Hall?
like the priest person.
Oh, Father Haverman. Father Haverman. Yeah, he started what was Detroit Hospital, which is now West Hall, right? So that was, both of them from the down, and all the Catholic churches. And he lived this incredible long life. I mean, he didn't die until like 1897 or something. So he had an incredibly long career, and not only worked really closely with the Catholic communities and the immigrant groups, he worked with the Protestant communities and a lot of the business people, because he was able to get money to support the hospitals. And he started also the orphanages. You know, on People's Avenue, you know, you're in the Institute Printing building. That was the former House of Good Shepherd, which was a kind of an orphanage and reformatory school for young girls. That was also, they might have been Sisters of, I think that was Sisters of Mercy were running that. You know where the little stairway is that you can't go across? It's like a mini approach. The building right across, near the Alumni House. The other big tall building basically going to the west side of the Alumni House. So.
Thank you